They don't want those long-haired, dope-smoking weirdos actually inside their corporate structure.
Yeah.
You can hire them as consultants, because then you can can them at will. But for God's sake, don't get them on the medical plan. Yeah.
There was an article in a magazine and had a fellow from IBM, he had a suit on and everything, and someone accused IBM of being weak in the multimedia market, where multimedia represents new and novel. He says, "Oh, we have some guys with earrings and long hair here." Defense.
Yes, well, one of the amusing things about the computer revolution and capitalism and all that is that technology has evolved so quickly that the people running capitalism from the top no longer understand the tools that are necessary for it. They have to pay guys with ponytails and piercings to turn on the machines every morning. And that must be very terrifying to them.
Well, but it was always the case. They didn't dig the oil wells either.
But the guys who dug the oil wells, I don't think carried an entirely different analysis of society. I mean, there were class differences, but these long-haired people are essentially, you're trading with the enemy if you're a corporation who uses these people. And every corporation must use them because they're the smart people.
They will use it. And all I'm saying is that capital will move wherever it can exploit information. And if now the information resides there, that's where they'll go to exploit that information for the continuing process of the economic machine. So even though we may be looking at something novel, ultimately when that source is exhausted, they'll move on to whatever else they have to move on to maintain themselves.
Well, no technology in history has ever been put in place with any clear understanding of what its implications would be. That's what we find out later. And I think the Internet probably will turn out to be very toxic for capitalism. When objects can be made of light, when a Ferrari costs as much as a Buick, because they're both made out of the same material, all of this class structure based on fetishization of objects is going to disappear.
It's interesting that both Pac-Bell and AT&T announced that they'd be getting the internet game. A little late, but not too late. But they've been late on delivery because they can't get the staff to build what they want to build. So they can't find any mason workers to put their highways together, and it's costing them billions. And I think AT&T actually announced it back down.
Well, AT&T is going to set up a system of satellites that are going to give ISDN speed to every man, woman, and child on this planet by pointing straight up at the sky, avoiding all these mafias of these local phone companies.
The curious thing, I think, in terms of the social implication of the electronic age is the possibility of almost a pure form of democracy, independent of bureaucratic structure. In other words, that there's the possibility that people can arrive at consensus unmanaged.
This is what's called electronic tribalism, that we can remove all these interpretive filters and structures and methods, the representative, the parliament, the election, all of that can be done away with, and that we can actually, and they hate that. It was very interesting in the last presidential campaign. I don't know if you picked up on it, but only Perot spoke for this. You know, he has this idea of these electronic town meetings. Well, of course, Perot represents a not mainstream point of view from the point of view of the Republicans and the Democrats. They both just piled onto that. They hate that. The idea of real democracy is as threatening to the politicians of this country as it is to the Chinese leadership. I mean, they do not want the will of the people to be expressed. But I think as we cohere into a single organism, there will be less and less need for these 18th century institutions that we have put in place and maintain with the power of the gun. Yeah.
I see a couple of possible paths that the effect that the new media is going to have on people could go. one would follow the model of what happened to Europe when the church stopped becoming the sole interpreter of the Bible, and the Bible became something that was printed and that anybody could read and interpret, and many people did, and started different interpretations. And that sort of caused an explosion of different ideas and different ways of looking at the world. The other would be, this is a little more difficult to express, but there's a terrific Buddhist magazine called Tricycle Magazine. And one of the things that's really terrific about it is it's non-sectarian, that it has a whole lot of viewpoints. It talks about all sorts of different flavors of Buddhism that people respect, because there aren't enough really Buddhists in America to have really cool magazines for all these different sects. Now, if that were to change tomorrow, and there was a different magazine for every sect, then each magazine would have a single viewpoint. The other viewpoints would be portrayed maybe, but as seen as kind of heresy and talked down about. And I can see that sort of thing happening on the web, or with the web-like media, where people start pursuing ideas that they're interested in and they care about. They may end up digging themselves a niche of their own preconceptions and their own, the prejudices that they already have about information, and going to information sources that support that, prop up things which may or may not be valid. The other option is that they could be exposed to so many different types of information from the original sources, not filtered through a mass media, that they'll actually become more informed about more different points of view. And I can't tell right now which way it's going to go, or maybe it's going to go in both directions for different people.
You can't keep the ignorant because there's too much access to the other knowledge.
Only if you want it, though. It's not like now. Today, if you turn on CNN,
you get not only the information you're interested in, you get information that CNN thinks a large audience of people is going to be interested in. So you're inevitably going to be confronted with things that mess with your prejudices. Now, the downside of this is that what's happening is CNN is mapping the societal prejudice of its market share onto all of its audience. And because there are so few media sources, there are a few selected branches of prejudice that you're allowed to tap into. But whether the future is going to break that up or just mean that there are going to be tighter groups and smaller groups of predispositions that are reinforced.
After that's a choice. Those that wish to insulate themselves in only the information they want to see that supports their narrow worldview will insulate themselves excellently. And those that wish to just throw themselves into the unknown constantly will have a ready available source of unknown.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing this. I mean, the V-chip, is that what it's called? This thing that lets you control what your kids can access on the internet. All this concern about pornography and so forth and so on. Clearly, some people are going to take the internet raw and love it, and other people are just going to want the conference on cat grooming and so forth and so on. There's nothing we can do about that. I mean, this is not a new problem. Let me recall to you that hundreds of millions of people in the world lead larval, low-awareness lives. I'm not talking about the poor, unwashed. I'm talking about people who watch TV 6 and 7 hours a day. That's a drug. And those people have chosen to check out of the historical adventure and just live in this miasma of pop culture. And we can decry the loss to them of awareness and so forth and so on. But on the other hand, it makes it easier for the rest of us, I think. I mean, I don't want all those people running around on the freeway and standing in front of me at the grocery store. And, better they should be home watching, whatever it is these people watch. And people will make these kinds of choices. And, it will become more and more extreme. I mean, if you want 24-hour-a-day teledildonic pornography, who's to say you shouldn't have this? But how it will affect your performance as a citizen, I don't know. I mean, it's just like mainlining heroin or something else. People have to make choices. But the fact that they will sometimes make bad choices is no argument ever for limiting their choices. You have to come to political bedrock with this. Are you a control freak, or do you believe in the dignity of human nature? If you trust human nature, then your politics should be one of always removing control. because control suppresses human nature. If, on the other hand, you're freaked out about human nature and you think that if we don't have laws, everybody will turn to cannibalism, sodomy, and cocaine, then, of course, everybody has to be leaned on and so forth and so on. But if you don't have faith in human nature, that's a pretty existential situation to be in, because where do you put your faith then?
It's possible that we'll fall into, I'll use your number, 5%, a situation where 95% are looking for novelty and 5% will produce it, and that the 5% who enjoy making novelty will make just what they want and find a narrow category of people who will find it.
Well, that's sort of, people say, what should be done, or what should we do besides take psychedelics? And I say, you cannot escape the media, you cannot escape the internet, you cannot escape our dilemma. You have two choices. You can consume or you can produce. That's it. And the people who consume are lost souls, and we all consume. And in those moments when we consume, we are lost souls. We need to produce, and what we produce is art. Art is the greatest era of art in the history of the human race is dawning right now. If we produce images and text from the heart, we will compete with these very large network channels called capitalism, communism, so forth and so on. In a sense, one way to think about the internet is it's a 40 million channel TV hookup. 40 million
5.5.
channels. 5.5 now. Well, but however many websites there are right now is what I'm thinking of. And so no one need feel isolated. And isolation has traditionally been a political tool for disempowering people. If you can make people feel isolated, you can make them shut up. So, if someone, let's say, is a communist and lives in some tiny town in North Dakota, in the past, their tendency, I think, would be to keep their mouth shut. But since they're getting 400 email messages a day from fellow communists and being informed of conferences going on constantly and huge FTP sites and all kinds of things, then they just say, that's my community and I'm willing to talk about it. They are no longer isolated. And this has empowered all kinds of fringe points of view. Some you may approve of, some you may not. But I approve of the concept of the fringe in and of itself. And then I figure, the memes can sort themselves out through natural selection. But if a meme doesn't ever get onto the playing field where the competition is happening, then it is not fairly dealt with and can die without having its proper opportunity to impact.
We took away the advantage of the leading memes in their ability to suppress the new oncoming memes. Like a marketplace where if I try to start an oil company today, I have a difficult time because the main players would disadvantage me and handicap me.
Right.
So basically a reverse handicapping where the small ones would have an advantage to come in.
This World Wide Web it just seems to be changing the nature of gravity, or at least the way I thought that these various physical forces always work. And suddenly time, which I understand is relative, is getting speeded up simply because I'm being barraged with so much information from so many different places, and it stops being a matter of trying to be smart by assimilating all this information and becomes more of a case of trying to be smart by seeing what I can leave alone, what I can distance myself, but what I can funnel out, because there's so much of it. And
well, I think we haven't quite learned how to use it yet, and also it isn't quite what it should be yet. It's maddening to try and function on it at 14.4 or 28.8. Everybody needs ISDN or faster. The people who use it most successfully, the way they live, is usually they do it through laptops. And it's just always on. I mean, what you need is 24-hour-a-day ISDN connection. It's always on. And so as you think, questions arise. and you set your infobots going. Your elves, you send them into the matrix, and they return with these bits of information. So as the day passes and your internal dialogue proceeds, you're constantly having messengers arrive with data which clarifies your understanding of the situation. So I think of it, what it will clearly become is it's just an adjunct to your mind. And when the laptop disappears and the whole thing becomes a subdermal implant or something, then you'll just say, gee, I wonder what the gross national product of Sri Lanka is this year. And then we'll say, the gross national product of Sri Lanka this year was, and you will be provided with this information. I mean, obviously there have to be filters and a certain level of sophistication, but never before in history have people been able to have a dialogue in real time with their own cultural database. And the quality of decisions is directly dependent on the quality of the information upon which the decisions are based. And in the past, good quality information is very hard to come by. The mass media is for the peasants. The guys above the 50th floor, and guys it is, as you know, they read special newsletters. They receive feed from certain think tanks. They deal with an entirely different kind of information than you do. Privileged information, managerial information, leader information. Well, now that's all changing. Sitting without telephone lines in Hawaii at the keyboard of my computer, I have better intelligence than Stansfield Turner had when he was director of the CIA for Jimmy Carter. And I'm Joe Nobody, you know, Earth Citizen 1. So that shows you how quickly the quality of information is improving. What you do with this is, of course, has always been an individual dilemma. The psychedelics, to my mind, were a great anticipation of the internet. It probably never would have been built had there not been psychedelics, even though it was built by terminal paranoids, because, you know, it was built as a command and control system for thermonuclear war. And but the wonder of that was that they built it so that it could not be destroyed, not realizing that what that meant was that they could not destroy it. You know, it has no central control. There is no board you bomb, no plug you pull. So they built this indestructible thing, and now it's loose and growing and unstoppable, and possibly leads to the reformulation of the nature of humanity, which would be then an interesting process. Thermonuclear war leads to an enormous paranoid response, which leads to the internet, which leads to liberation. I've always felt that atomic weapons were an enormous IQ booster for the human race. And when you think about the fact that a global tribe of carnivorous monkeys have possessed thermonuclear delivery systems for 50 years, and only twice were they ever used, I think it must have sobered us immeasurably, because there were many issues in those years where, had there not been thermonuclear bombs, there would have been war. And so it became a kind of inoculation against war because it was so horrible, and it forced the human race, I wouldn't go so far as to say grow up, but it propelled us at least into adolescent awareness of our dilemma. Well, it's dinner time. Tonight we'll do the time wave. I doubt we'll revisit this particular area, so if you hated this, it's over. Thank you.